We need more men like Jim Douglas. Without a doubt, way over half this room has been directly and indirectly affected by Jim Douglas. He is truly the father of Wisconsin wrestling. When he started wrestling in 1955, there were 54 schools. 10 years later, George Martin wrote an article for the Green Bay Press-Gazette and said we were up to 358 schools that had wrestling, and no one had a greater effect on Wisconsin wrestling than Jim Douglas. If you want to know how he's revered in his own community, the man's been dead for more than 50 years, and when I talk to Coleman people about telling me the story, they all started with Mr. Douglas. Mr. Douglas, after 50 years. He came into that community, he changed it forever. One of my favorite stories, this shows I'm really old, I apologize. You know, Milwaukee used to be really tough at wrestling. You know, Milwaukee and Appleton is where wrestling started in the state of Wisconsin. And South Milwaukee was a school of about 3,000 and tougher than nails. And they'd won the state multiple times. And one of the guidance counselors ran into the wrestling coach and said, "What are you doing?" He says, "We're wrestling some little podunk school from up north today. So I got to go take care of that." He said, "Well, where is it?" "I don't know. They're just a little bitty nobody. Nobody's ever heard of them." And the guidance counselor saw him again the next day. He said, "How'd it go?" He said, "That little nobody's named Coleman, and they kicked the snot out of us." Just destroyed us. And they did. 7 state titles when there were no divisions. So they wrestled the biggest schools in the state, the smallest schools in the state, and they beat them all. They have a sign as you're going into their locker room to weigh in, and it says, "If you want respect, give respect." And the Coleman athletes are incredible. If you've never wrestled in Coleman, you have to go there at least once. You probably won't win, but you got to go there at least once. We made a mistake. We beat them in 2009, and they really made us pay for it. We went back up there about 6 years in a row, and they had us for Parents' Night. Oh, we're not even at your conference. And they introduced the first state champions, and they stood up. And then they introduced each one of the championship teams, and they stood up. And as they kept standing up, I noticed something. Only the first names changed. They were still Pilaf. They were still Champagne. The names never changed. They just kept right on winning. And it's incredible. And honestly, this is absolutely 100% true. After they have all the state champions stand up, then the young guys, 20 years old, 22 years old, with babies, stand up and say things like, "Class of 36, and make that commitment. How are you going to beat that? We're going to have Jim Douglas Jr. come up and tell us a little bit about his dad.
If Dad were here today, he would humbly insist that others were largely responsible for the successes of wrestling at Coleman. That despite a dual record by 1966 of 107 wins and 2 losses. First, he had acknowledged the role of Principal Walter Ott. It was Ott who, in 1955, gave the green light to wrestling at Coleman. Money was tight that first season, and I remember it. I was in grade school. Not everyone had a uniform, and Mr. Ott vowed that never again would Ralph Peterson compete in bare feet and blue jeans. Yeah, that's true. The next season, everyone had a proper uniform. Dad would then pay homage to hundreds of boys who were at the heart of Coleman's successes over the years. Mostly they and we were farm boys. Familiar names: Scarda, Pillet, Pat, Champagne, Kinziger. Nick the Bear, one of my dad's favorites because he killed a bear at night in a cornfield. True story. He was my classmate. I just heard about it yesterday. for the 13th time. Nick regales in the fact that he killed a black bear in Norb Doyle's cornfield under moonlight. You remember that, Jimmy? Before the matches, Dad talked about each boy's responsibilities to the team, to the school, and of course to the community of Coleman. He had an opportunity to teach in 1959 and coach in a Green Bay school, where he could make a lot more money, but he had a great sense of loyalty and responsibility to Coleman. So he remained in Coleman. 5 championships, 2 second places followed from 59 to 1966. Yes, we wrestled everybody, including Milwaukee South. And then I think that he would insist that much of the credit for those successes in those years went to assistant coach Jim Ritchie. Jim was a lot like Dad. He was principled, he was very sincere, and he was loyal. And in time, his passion for the sport led him to a highly successful career as a head coach at Pulaski and other schools. In an interview with the Green Bay Press-Gazette, Jim said Dad, his mentor, was, quote, willing to give everything of himself, particularly to youth, and he never expected or wanted anything in return. However, if he were here today, he would be humbled by this honor, as I am. With that in mind, I think Dad would agree with me that the plaque honoring his lifetime achievements in collegiate prep wrestling as a wrestler and as a coach should be placed on permanent display at Coleman High School. In a sense, it represents Dad's belated return to the community he loved.